Welcome back to PricePlow. This is Mike, and once again, I have the incredible Shawn Wells back on the channel. Shawn, this is, oh man, your fourth or fifth time here, and right now it is October 30th of 2020, so happy Halloween, everyone out there, and it's been quite an eventful year, but we haven't had you on for a little while, so I want to give you a quick reintroduction and then see how you're doing, and then talk about today's topic, which we decided we were going to talk about the mitochondria, what the mitochondria are, and how to why they're important, and then if we think that they're not running well, how to optimize them for better human health and happiness and everything else. So welcome back, Shawn.
Thanks for having me on, Mike. Love it.
Yeah, definitely, always. And so, Shawn, you are now, and let's just get your social media out there right in the front, but the Ingredientologist. So at Ingredientologist on Instagram. And your specialty is talking a lot about various supplement ingredients, but that's definitely not the only thing you do. You are a biochemist, you are a registered dietitian, you are in several organizations and have several letters behind your name, which I have to pull up your website. But we in our first podcast, you introduced us to yourself and gave us a lot of that, so people can always click back and talk and see the original Optimizing Brain Health podcast that we did back in the day. But if you want to quickly talk about some of your credentials there and how you are, and you've been talking about mitochondria since a long time before a lot of other people. So that's kind of want to bring you in here.
Yeah, thanks, man. Yeah, I have a lot of letters, but the main thing and I was like a chief clinical dietitian at one point, working in hospitals and nursing homes. A fellow in the International Society of Sports Nutrition, and I've come up through the ranks as a formulator. I've formulated over 500 products in the industry, been called the world's greatest formulator, which is a nice thing to be called, but is definitely a little maybe over the top.
There's a lot of formulators listen to this channel, and there was a ton of great formulators, especially in different corners of the market and everything. And we're going to kind of dive into one of those corners today, which is why I'm excited.
Yeah. But most recently I've actually been a lot less focused on formulation and more focused on creating novel ingredients, and been working with my partner, Kylan at NNB. And that's where my focus has been. And that's where a lot of my excitement lies, is coming out with new novel ingredients that have research, and we're working on that, getting the intellectual property around them, patents, conducting the human, animal, and cell studies, getting GRAS and toxicology. So each ingredient we're working on is a 2 to 3 year project to go from conception to commercialization, and is anywhere from probably $300,000 to $1 million in investment. Of which Kylan is very gracious to back a lot of my ideas. So it's a very exciting time for me, and this is where I'm super passionate right now, and I feel like I've kind of turned a corner, and I'm really not doing as much formulations now.
Right. And so, and just for full disclosure, we're also doing some content work with NNB, and that's where we're talking a lot. Yeah. And what we eventually talked about ingredientology in the past, where we can help other scientists help create new ingredients as well, along with yourself, and co-brand them or co-patent them or whatever you got to do. But then we also went back and talked about, all right, well, who is this NNB Nutrition company? Who is Kylan? And we told the NNB story. And one of the things that came up there was that this, and I'm not saying he'll never do it, but there's no stimulants in this group of ingredients. This is everything is going for feeling good, but clean energy. And that's the main emphasis is everything's clean energy. And there's obviously a lot of Shawn Wells going on behind the scenes in this. So I want to talk about some of what it takes to get clean energy, because obviously we've seen caffeine consumption rise a ton, and a lot of people are just feeling bogged down, or they feel they're not sleeping right. There's a zillion things going on, but at the end of the day, it seems like we have a lot of just in general energy problems, and that brings us back to the core of what produces our energy. So that's where I wanted to go with this conversation.
Yeah, and that's a huge part of who I am, to your point. And I actually have a book coming out in February called The Energy Formula.
Nice.
And for me, T-cream and dynamine were patents of mine with my co-patent holders, Dr. Tim Ziegenfuss and Dr. Hector Lopez. So energy is a huge focus for me, but as I've been evolving, it's less about central nervous stimulation and more about optimization and certainly mitochondrial health. And there is a resonant theme of these ingredients that I've been working on and bringing to market with and through Kylan. It would be mitochondrial energy, working on what we've talked about before is insufficient cellular energy states. That's somewhere that I've been, like I've had autoimmune shutdown with Hashimoto's, fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue syndrome, Epstein-Barr. I've had a pituitary tumor. We've talked about that. I've had just a lot of issues in my life with my health, and I grew up obese and then went anorexic and then became orthorexic. And so this is part of my journey, is trying to bring, when I talk on podcasts and a lot of my writing, it's about love and compassion. For sure. I love a lot of the mental and spiritual discussions too. But when it comes to supplementation, I love optimization instead of, things that are coming at a cost of your health. Like you can get muscle gain at a cost to your health. You can get stimulation at a cost to your health. But I like working on the optimization front where you can live longer and live better. You can put more life in your years, not just years in your life. So that's where my focus is. And certainly I think Mito is the next Mito is the next keto. And right. I really think like this is what we're going to be focusing on, because you're seeing nearly all biological aging tied into mitochondrial health and nearly all disease tied into mitochondrial health. And so it's the future of health, supplementation, medicine, fitness. We're going to be talking about how are your mitochondria constantly.
Excellent. And so I think to back everything up, like how would you define, what is the mitochondria? Let's just first off talk about that. Is this just something in my heart? So what?
It's kind of. I mean, it's kind of like the heart for the cell, if you will. It's an organelle that's creating the energy currency for the body, adenosine triphosphate, ATP. And so it does so through this mainly like the electron transport chain is maybe something you remember, but regardless, the mitochondria in the cell, you probably remember in biology seeing one, but a lot of these energy dependent cells, like in the brain and especially the heart, have 1,000 of them. There's a lot of mitochondria, and specifically there's a tissue, brown adipose tissue, that we've talked about before in conjunction with like grains of paradise or cold plunging or whatever, that the brown adipose tissue is highly thermogenic. And the reason that it's brown is because it's mitochondrial dense. It has that brown color because of all the mitochondria in that tissue, which is just fascinating. And you only have about 5-6 ounces of it on your body, mostly around your collarbone, your clavicles, and it's there to give you heat, thermogenesis, and also possibly it could be one of the ways that we have like metabolic advantages. Certain people, like they have this tissue, they have more of that tissue, and they also have it more active. We see that with people that are just, highly thermogenic. They have like warm bodies, they have higher, body temperature, they just can crank through food and stay thin. I mean, maybe that's you actually, Mike. Wow. Maybe you have more brown adipose tissue, but that's a really interesting one. And like I said, like grains of paradise is one that we know that can enhance brown adipose tissue activity, and doing cold plunges is something that we've seen that enhances the activity and number potentially.
Okay, cool. So to back it up even more, like these mitochondria, do they take the calories I eat and turn it into this ATP, which we kind of call the energy currency, or does it all, when we eat, like, do we take that food and just turn it into energy, or does there more like quote unquote magic happening behind the scenes?
Yeah, I mean that's what it is. Like we're using carbohydrate, and if you remember, like the citric acid cycle, Krebs cycle, the tricarboxylic acid, it's all the same thing. Um, but it's that crank, and you're taking electrons, and then it goes into the electron transport chain, and you are creating that energy currency, the ATP, that you're kicking out of this cycle. You can do that with fatty acids. You can do that with carbohydrate, glucose, and you can do that with ketones. And like ketones really are interesting to me because, like, with people like me that have metabolic dysfunction, that we're obese, that we're insulin resistant, we're metabolically dysfunctional, that it bypasses some of the issues at the secondary complex of the electron transport chain, that can cause those insufficient cellular energy states. And so ketones is like the reason why, like, people like have that sometimes boom of clarity of energy, that it's not necessarily the same from person to person, but I think the more dysfunctional you are metabolically, the more it can like provide clarity, because you're insulin resistant, and so therefore you're glucose intolerant and not taking that energy into the cell and turning it around for ATP as well. So that's where like ketones can come in and really provide that spark.
Right. And that's what's so cool about humans and our evolution, our biology, is that we can handle multiple fuel sources. And even though many of us are quote unquote sugar burners, we don't need to be sugar burners. We have plenty of fat on our bodies, and we can get fat in the diet that we can also eventually turn into this energy. And so that's what's exciting, is that these mitochondria, these powerhouse cells, we call it the powerhouses of the cells, because they are creating the energy tokens, known as ATP, but they're able to function with various sources of food and like energy substrate. So it's not just that we have to eat this one thing, but we can instead survive as Eskimos up with only whale blubber and stuff like that. We can survive in the tropics as humans, eating tons of bananas. Like, so it's really cool that the same human body can take in these different energy sources. And so
and that's that metabolic flexibility, Mike. Yeah,
exactly. And that's what I love. And some people though seem to do better with one or the other, or it's great to be flexible and be able to handle both. Now, so for someone listening to this, like it sounds cool. Like I would love to have like a little meter that shows me how good are my mitochondria running in general. Like, so how do I tell if my mitochondria are healthy or not? How do I tell if I'm metabolically dysfunctional, like you said, or have some of these quote words like insufficient cellular energy, which we could talk about a little bit more. But how can I gauge if I think my mitochondria are running okay?
I have a simple way. I'm actually talking to a friend of mine that runs this company called Mycon, that's working on a very advanced testing with humans that actually can freeze your sample and then look at it at a lab and get back to you the results of how your mitochondria are functioning.
Would it be a tissue sample or a blood sample?
It's a swab, actually. Ooh, cool. And it's really interesting. It's not out yet. You can look up Mycon. It might be Mycon Health, but MYCHON. Really interesting. A lot of funding, a lot of really breakthrough technologies. I haven't tried it yet, but he's arranging something with me. But I have something that I've been talking about for years that I feel like is a simple way to get like a one-off gauge of, that's it.
Cool.
Or your health span.
And watching on YouTube, I'm trying to do a screen share. Was that?
Yeah, that's that idea of health span versus lifespan that he's talking about. That's putting more life in your years than years in your life, right?
Like, right. So, I was going to say that word lifespan is what's important here.
Yeah. Well, health span here. Yeah. Health span. So it's like not just living longer, but being healthier during your life. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so also for me, like the one-off that I think is a lot simpler that I think everyone should be using is when you are in these insufficient cellular energy states, you are getting into three big issues of damage to your body. And none of these are problematic acutely. They can actually be quite helpful in signaling and the body working correctly. It's when we get into these chronic situations that it's a problem. Just like when we're chronically in the sympathetic nervous system state, it's a problem. It's okay to be sympathetic nervous system, fight or flight sometimes, and it's okay to be rest and digest, parasympathetic other times. It's meant to be kind of that yin and yang balance, but we're like, grinding, ultra sympathetic, and that's when it's a problem. And that's when we get breakdown in our bodies and we have cortisol elevated all the time. And it's very similar with these three things. We have oxidation. You're kicking off lots of free radicals with improper efficiency of the mitochondria, either through the mitochondria functioning very well, or a way you can gain efficiency is to have more mitochondria around, which is mitochondrial biogenesis. And then besides oxidation, there's inflammation, and that is causing damage to the tissues. And again, inflammation can be good with like an immune response or after a workout, or, it's a good signal. It's things working correctly, and that's okay. But chronic inflammation is not. And, you talked about things like the seed oils and all these things that can,
we're going there.
Yeah, that can cause chronic inflammation, these ultra processed oils, these ultra processed foods with all the sugar, et cetera, without the fiber, without the resistant starches. It's very different when you eat whole food versus ultra processed food. But going on to the third one, it's glycation, blood sugar damage. So from blood sugar hanging around too long and insulin staying elevated too long, we have problems. So one of the best markers that you could probably see first is fasting insulin, but it's a little bit more complicated, a little bit more expensive. For me, like the best three, like my hallmark three, if I was to kind of put together a mitochondrial health gauge and then tell you your biological age versus your chronological age, and tell you your likelihood of getting nearly every disease associated with metabolic dysfunction, and therefore mitochondrial dysfunction, would be hemoglobin A1C looking at glycation, CRP, C-reactive protein looking at inflammation, and oxidized LDL looking at oxidation. I'd add probably a couple more labs in there too, like to look at overall health. I think vitamin D is critical, especially now with the immune system and the whole hormonal milieu. Lipoprotein A, I think, is probably like a big gun. I don't like cholesterol. They've actually shown in numerous studies, the higher cholesterol, the longer life, period, the end. LDL is not the bad cholesterol. All this stuff is so wrong. It's so frustrating. The very small, very dense cholesterol of LDL is bad, but there's also a large fluffy LDL. So, looking at lipoprotein A is a great thing to look at on that front. But so at these three,
I guess, to interrupt, I think with the lipid panel, though, I wouldn't discredit the whole thing. If you're going to look at oxidized LDL, I think the triglyceride and the HDL ratio is an easy, cheap one to look at too. And it's going to come along for the ride with these lipid panels. So you're going to see that. And I kind of consider the HDL to be a super simple report card. Not sure in terms of mitochondrial health, but in terms of the greater picture. If you have a high HDL, low LDL, or if you have a high HDL, low triglycerides, your LDL is basically meaningless.
Yeah,
and
it's really,
Yeah,
my biggest issue is the LDL demonization.
Exactly. Yes.
That's the biggest thing. And trying to get a total cholesterol as low as possible. And those are just ridiculous. And you do end up with mitochondrial dysfunction. You do end up with CoQ10 depletion. And then that can cause muscle cramps, spasms, and then even worse, worsen heart health. So we're seeing things like these statins have higher mortality rates than lower mortality rates. And it's absurd. So yeah, I totally get what you're getting at. You can do a deeper dive into your cholesterol by looking at a VAP or NMR test. And then you can see all the different particles, chylomicrons, et cetera. So that's a good way to look at that. And I love triglycerides as a marker too. That would be in my top 10. But going back to those three, the glycation, inflammation, oxidation, I think that would give you a great snapshot. And typically, we're not looking at those until after you've had a heart attack with CRP, after you've had type 2 diabetes or hemoglobin A1C. So it's frustrating to me that like we could use some simple labs that maybe are 100, 150 bucks. We could look at them twice a year, and we could reshape medicine by saying like, yep, here's your biological age. Here's how your mitochondria are approximately functioning. Here's your risk for disease. You need to start looking at this. You need to start making some changes to your lifestyle, de-stressing, eating a healthier diet, getting some exercise in, et cetera, that you can age better. And we're just not looking at these.
Yeah, definitely. And I know no business whatever conflict here. I go to requestattest.com. That's where I get my labs. And you order the labs, have them sent to your nearby either LabCorp or Quest Diagnostics, have a scheduled appointment there. It really couldn't be easier. And it's not that expensive. I mean, it is money. And you can get out of control and you can have them draw a lot of vials of blood, but you can get away with, these 3 or 4 important ones for around, I'd say under $150. And you could, the metabolic panels and lipid panels are super cheap at this point. So add a little bit more for the CRP, add a little bit more. If you wanted to get an extreme, so add in a little bit more for the A1C if that's not already added. And then you already have pretty much a lot of the most important things there. And it's good to see. So, but going back even further, like, can you feel like, is there a feel? Like I'm guessing that if you have a high A1C, a high CRP, and a lot of like damage from oxidized LDL cholesterol or whatever, a lot of oxidation in general, I have a feeling you're just going to feel crummy. Like if people out there are listening, 1,000%. You might not even need to have a test to know that maybe like things aren't running optimally. Like, is there just a good litmus test of like, I don't know, like the funk in bed or something like that?
No, you're spot on. I mean, cellular energy translates into life energy. Like what we call energy or vitality or whatever, the more cellular energy you have, the more efficiently you're running with that cellular energy, having more mitochondria around, having the mitochondria be healthy, having good transport processes to take energy into the mitochondria, with the like carnitine shuttle, things like that. If everything's running properly, then you will feel more life energy.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. Yeah. So my simple litmus test for me personally is being able to keep up my daughter, my toddler daughter. And there's days where if I eat like junk for a week or so, which happens, it's Halloween, I'm sneaking a candy here or there, at some point I get to the point where I am not like wanting to, like, we do a lot of bear crawling and wanting to get down and chase and run around and get out of bed and read early and all that good stuff that you're supposed to do. And when I am eating my personal optimal diet and taking my personal optimal supplement stack, I'm running circles around her. So it's like there is a fine difference, and I can tell it's like I'm there, but I'm not as much there. I'm like in bed a little bit longer, and I'm not the kind of person who typically lays in bed. Like my wife will sit there for 10 hours planning her day, and I just go and get up usually. So when for me, like I could kind of tell when things aren't optimal just by like the get up and go. And if I'm willing to like get down a bear crawl with a daughter, then that's good. If I'm like, for whatever reason, like, like being a little, then it's time to like start thinking about like, hey, how is my sleep performance? Have I been training hard enough? And what am I eating? And in terms of, two of the things we really haven't talked about with mitochondria are sleep and the training. Is there anything you want to quickly touch on there?
So actually it's been shown that you are insulin resistant when you don't get enough sleep. As little as just 6 hours will put you in a state of insulin resistance acutely. And so if you're doing this on a chronic basis with chronic sleep deprivation, you're putting yourself into type 2 diabetes. And that's what you see, again, like when someone's just sleeping as little as 6 hours a night or worse, that they're putting themselves at higher risk for coronary heart disease, for type 2 diabetes, for insulin resistance. And so you literally have less energy. Your synapses fire more slowly when you don't get enough sleep. So that brain fog you're feeling is real, and your desire to grab sugar and caffeine and and compensate is real.
Oh yeah.
So that's why it's important to get enough sleep and have that restorative health. And you're also, in sleep doing detoxification and autophagy, which you do also get from things like fasting and exercise. People just think it somehow is only associated with fasting, but it's associated with sleep and exercise as well. And it's important to have that restorative time. That's just like I was saying before, like in the autonomic nervous system, like that rest and digest needs to be balanced with the fight or flight, so that you can here's another example, like with, you mentioned training and exercise, is that sometimes you can exercise too much and you're not just overtrained, you're under recovered. That's the other term, right, that we're talking about. Like you could maybe double your training, but you would need to markedly change your eating and sleeping to compensate for that, and hydration and other things. So it's you can look at it as under recovered. And so we need to have some balance, and sleep certainly is a big component of that. And so I'm a big fan of sleep hygiene, of keeping up with your circadian rhythm, and having consistent sleep and wake times for your sleep and wake cycle. Otherwise, you have something called like social jet lag, where you are going to sleep, let's say like during the week at 10 or 11 o'clock at night, but on the weekend, you stay up till 1 or 2 or 3 in the morning. This is literally like flying to Europe, and then you're expecting your body to work well. But again, you're in a state of brain fog, you're in a state of insulin resistance. And this is something that you're doing to yourself chronically on a weekend basis. It's not healthy. They've shown that like shift work displacement, like where you're working a night shift, people can live 30% less long. It's a dramatic impact on your circadian rhythm. So all this stuff is affecting your ability to create energy efficiently. So if you work with your circadian rhythm, if you work with your biology, if you give yourself rest time, if you nourish yourself, then you can allow for efficient mitochondrial cellular energy.
Gotcha. And funny enough, though, I think tomorrow night or the night after is going to be daylight savings time, of course, everyone's favorite. I swear, someday I'm going to run for political office, and I'm just going to run on one thing.
Get rid of it. Yeah.
One thing. That's all I have to say.
Yeah.
We're getting rid of daylight savings time.
There's data on that. There's data on that. There's data on greater motor vehicle accidents as a result of that change. There's greater mortality risk.
Surgery. I wouldn't want to touch a surgeon.
Exactly.
So what, do you have a quick life hack for how are you approaching daylight savings?
You can start changing ahead of time, the time you get up or go to sleep in relation to it, to help yourself adjust so it's not as abrupt. You can play with things like, a sleep mask or blue light exposure in the morning, depending on which side of this you're on. But yeah, you can do some hacks where it's not as abrupt, and you can kind of plan ahead. And then also those, maybe that first week, you also don't do anything that's too mentally intensive. To your point, like a surgery, I agree. I certainly wouldn't want to have a surgery on November 1st or something. So,
right.
Cool. That is something that you can look at for sure. Yeah.
Thank you. Awesome. So back to the mitochondria. The one thing I noticed for me personally, and obviously I don't have the mitochondrial swab or anything, but I like training in the morning. 9 a.m., like sometime before 10 a.m. seems to be my best, but high intensity interval training for me, like if I don't get going hard for at least like just 5 minutes, and it's not 5 minutes straight of HIIT training, it's just even just like 5 cycles on 1 minute, things don't seem as good. Like the high intensity interval training, the sprint setup, even if it's just a little bit, really just seems like just alter my day. So that's like the one thing where I could just kind of tell things are firing better after I do it. Of course, the first few minutes right after it kind of suck, but then like once you've recovered and everything, that's a big one for me. But
so that's mitochondrial hormesis or mitohormesis. I mean, that's ideal. Like when you're challenging your body with the right level of adversity, it's staying in. If you look at like a bell curve, kind of that center area would be the ideal amount of hormesis, which we call eustress, in that stress bucket called allostatic load. And if you're on either tail of that bell curve, it's either not enough stress, so think low intensity, steady state exercise, just running on a treadmill at the same rate.
Yay.
Or there's an area of too much stress, of distress, that would be like your overtraining of like trying to do high intensity interval training for hours. So like that idea of causing the right amount of stress, eustress, in that Goldilocks zone of the bell curve is ideal to get adaptation to happen. And when you're training at like 90, 95, 100% of your maximum capacity for a short period of time, then that's where adaptation happens. When you're training, just you're getting exercise in and moving your body, but it's steady state kind of stuff, you're not really getting adaptation. And that's why you don't see performance changes with just running on the treadmill.
Right.
You see kind of like, hey, he's good at running on the treadmill. But you see changes in body composition, changes in metabolic machinery happening at that kind of more extreme level, closer to like your fullest threshold, if you will, of performance. So that's where that high intensity interval training is very logical.
Definitely. And one thing I like to emphasize, and this will be disputed, but I think there's a lot of research behind it, is that exercise does not necessarily equate to weight loss, because exercising increases your appetite. You could actually slingshot in the wrong direction. And there's plenty of people that you see on the treadmill all the time, not losing any weight necessarily. I think dietary choices, attacking satiety are going to help with weight loss far more down the line than exercise. But exercise has to do with general health. And that kind of leads us into like the first of a bunch of ingredients we could talk to, because you are the ingredientologist, of course. But there's one ingredient that we produce with our own muscles, and it's L-beta. And this is an amino acid, but it's really more of a signal than an amino acid. And this signal pretty much lets the rest of your body know. And we have a whole video talking about this, but it lets your body know that, exercise is happening. Like, start running these programs, start doing this, start oxidizing more fat, start protecting the bone and muscle tissue. And there's all these different things that happen. And to me, it just seems like it, and I don't have any evidence for this, but it seems like it activates harder when you train the high intensity interval training style. So one of the ingredients I do love is Mitochondria from NNB Nutrition and the Beba, because it does seem like when I do the low intensity steady state type of exercise, it does seem to like make it happen a little faster and kick it up a notch without having to do the stimulant stuff, which of course I am not afraid of stimulants, but I've cycled down on my stims a lot in the last month, and I was getting bad for a second. Let's just put it that way. So I'm back down to like, I can handle just 2 cups of coffee in a day and I'm happy. And that's where I like it. So you start to feel these supplements as we're testing some of these different supplements. And the Mitochondria L-beta is one that it turns the lower intensity steady state training into something more for me personally. So yeah, I don't know if you have anything to add there, but
I totally agree. It's a really like one of those miracle ingredients that's seems that like word, but it's almost too good to be true. And like, how can this be associated with all these things? It's because, like you said, it's a signal for intense exercise. So therefore, we have data on it, enhancing autophagy, enhancing lean body mass, reducing fat mass, helping with, fuel utilization and glycogen storage, and improving bone mass, improving like a lot of the different processes that are improving VO2 max, and all this stuff. It's just crazy. Like it just literally seems like this is ridiculous to almost make these claims, but it's because it's the signal for intense exercise. And like you said, it could augment. I like to think about it as an exercise augmenter, your exercise, so that your body sees it as, we're working out even harder than he actually is. Like it's like you getting extra reps or extra steps out of each workout. So yeah, it's a really cool ingredient.
Yeah, definitely. And I definitely, I use a pre-workout, and the reason I am doing some low intensity steady state exercises because I'm doing a 5K turkey trot, and I am not very good of a runner. Always been a swimmer. So anyway, I've tried to do better, but
there are some studies, Mike, by the way, that actually showed with runners that they had improved running performance even long distance when they were working on sprints.
Definitely, yeah. Yeah, like you said, yeah, you're only going to get so much out of the running the same pace over and over and over. You just become really good at running that same pace. And sometimes you kind of need to shock your body into like thinking that it's like running for its life. And then that's going to promote change and everything. So what else can we do? Like, so supplementally, so yeah, we generate this BABA, but it's pretty cool to supplement more. And that's one of my favorite unique novel ingredients. That's how we first started talking with NNB, because we wrote about it a long time ago, and we finally got a stable form of it out there. So really excited about that. What else can we do? And so I want to back up first before, and you mentioned it earlier on, but yeah, so removing like the ultra processed foods, I think is going to do so many magnitudes more for mitochondrial health, because you start to look at what you kind of have to walk into it backwards, because the study's no one's going to, the food makers aren't going to publish this study or whatever, but you start seeing the people who are eating all these processed foods have all these conditions, and all these conditions are all surrounding with metabolic dysfunction, mitochondrial dysfunction, insufficient cellular energy. I don't know if we have like a smoking gun, one study that says like, oh, soybean oil is going to make you have insufficient cellular energy, but we have the mechanism, we have the epidemiology, because we're just watching what's happening in America as we've added more and more of these processed and ultra processed foods. And we have the results. So to me, it does make sense. I just don't know if there's a smoking gun study, but anyway, the more processed foods we eat, the worse we ultimately feel, the more we keep eating for various reasons. And then the more dysfunctional we become. And then all of the blood work that you're talking about also goes downhill, or kind of in a way uphill, depending on what numbers you're talking about. So to me, before we talk about any ingredients, I just want to disclaim that, like, if you're eating a lot of garbage in the center of the grocery store, if you're, eating out all the time and they're frying it in 10-week-old oil, that's going to do getting rid of that from your diet is going to do a lot more than, adding some, and I love Mitoburn, but getting rid of the 10-week-old oil in your French fry fryer is going to do a lot more than adding Mitoburn to that pig, so that's my disclaimer. But let's say we start cleaning up and we stop eating processed foods. We start cooking for ourselves, because what else have we been doing for the last 6 months anyway? Rant. I'm getting going here. But if you have not figured out how to cook a little bit better over these last 6 months, I don't know what you've been doing, because you can't be sitting there ordering phone on your app all day long. It's too expensive, and you don't know what they're putting in it. And that food is not going to be as clean as what you can cook with traditional foods yourself. Bring back the saturated fat. So anyway, so you start doing that. You start cooking for yourself. You start, when you are healthy enough to do so, you start exercising more, and hopefully a little bit more intensely when it's healthy and when your joints can handle it and everything, when you have less inflammation. What can we add now that we're starting to clean things up and we're stopping the soybean oil madness? What else can we do?
Well, I think, like you're saying, eating whole food, paleo, call it Whole30, whatever you want, just getting back to whole food and avoiding ultra processed food, which not only has those oils that you're talking about, but also high amounts of sugars and processed sugars and artificial sweeteners and flavors and colors and hormones and antibiotics and then these high bliss point foods that trigger dopamine and serotonin, and that have like sweetness and saltiness and crunchiness and softness and gooey, and like it's literally like you're having brain gasms, and they work on that. they literally engineer foods around that so that once you pop, you can't stop, or
and they're low protein on top of that.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, that's getting into the whole foods and eating the diets that we were meant to eat. Whether it's vegan or carnivore, I don't really care. Like, as long as you construct it well, it's about eating whole foods. And that's a very important step. And then definitely removing sugar as a part of that is a big thing. Like, it's too pervasive. It's in so many forms. It's in all of our foods. It's it's in foods that you wouldn't think it's in. It's certainly in all this, syrups and sauces, and it's just super pervasive, and it's making us addicted. Our brain reacts very similarly as it does to cocaine, and we can't stop. And there's a reason it's in that, compulsory area of the front of the gas station, by the register. We make these impulse decisions and just, eat these things, and we feel guilty and we feel bad about it and we have shame around it. But why are we so driven to have it? I mean, think about that. And it's because they've been engineered that way. It's because we're sleepy and we don't have enough cellular energy. So we go back to like impaired decision making. It's much harder. It takes more energy to make new decisions, to make these healthier decisions, than to fall back on your bad decisions, like the kind of your what you're comfortable with. So, I mean, that happens when we're tired. And, we'll buy the energy drinks and the candy and the coffee with the sugar and creamer and the honey buns and all the things that people are doing every day. And if you look around the convenience store, it's literally built around addiction with caffeine, with sugar, with porn, with lottery, with smoking, with all this stuff. I mean, it's your addiction central, and it's very hard to do anything healthy in there because they're banking on impulse in there. So it's just something to be mindful of, is removing those kinds of things, the impulse and the addiction and the sugar and the processed foods, and getting back to more rational, healthy decision making.
Yeah, one thing I recommend to people, this is a semi-bad recommendation, but to the scientist type of people out there, is the good part of the recommendation: get a constant glucose monitor, whichever way you can. It's still kind of prescription based, but it's become easier to get them. But keep your diet the same for a few days, and notice when you eat that junk, you're gonna feel good. It feels good. They designed it to feel great. They hit like 7 different receptors to slam you one way or the other, and your blood sugar is going to go up. But when the blood sugar is on its way down, that's when I notice the anxiety and the cravings happen. The ride down, and especially if you don't like mask the ride down with more caffeine or more sugar to like keep it up, the ride down is never worth the ride up. And I definitely believe that a lot of the people, quote unquote, anxiety out there is simply just caused by just a disruptive diet where you're just up and down, like you're on a roller coaster, and you're not sure if you're lacking sleep, if you need a nap, you're not sure if you need more sugar, you're not sure if you need more caffeine. Yeah. It's like you don't know which addiction to manage here. And I catch myself going into that issue as well. And so like a constant glucose monitor will tell you, like, when you're on your way down, it's not worth it. It's way better just to be even keel and keep the sugar down. And like the carbohydrate load in general, although, I do often like post-workout carbs when your body can suck them up, but just the up and down, starting from 8 a.m. all the way through like 11 p.m. It's just self-sabotage. So constant glucose monitor shows you all that stuff. And at some point, your cells just stop responding as well. And then you mix in a little bit of fat with those fats in there, and that fat's going straight to storage. So that's got a little bit off topic there, but yeah, that's one of the things I definitely recommend to someone who's really trying to figure this out.
Agreed. And when you're kind of going down, that's when you feel hypoglycemic. I mean, I would have patients that had 600s that were going down to a 300, and they'd be having like a hypoglycemic scenario happen. Jeez, really? They could look very ill, but if you didn't know what their baseline was, you would think 300, let's give them glucagon instead of giving them, let's give them insulin. Mm-hmm. Instead, they need glucagon to actually raise their blood sugar. You have to know where the baseline is. But when people are dropping, that's, especially when they're dropping quickly, like it feels like a hypoglycemic reaction. Mm-hmm. It's also triggering things like different hormone hunger signals that make you want to eat, and yes, have you like hangry and crabby and anxious and all those things. So it's definitely something, to be mindful of, as that roller coaster. And definitely you feel better if you can flatten that roller coaster out of blood glucose. And then, with the CGM that you're talking about, you could also look at the differences of being well rested versus not well rested, and how that differs on the same food that you think is, your body's going to react to the same way. But when you're impaired with glucose tolerance and insulin sensitivity, you're not reacting to those carbohydrates the same way.
Definitely. And one thing that a lot of us have noticed too, and this isn't universal, but when you eat too late in the day, the next day is just a mess. Like if I have 11 p.m. snack, you can say what you want, like calories in, calories out, all that. When the blood sugar is a mess the next day and your blood sugar is constantly elevated, I honestly don't think you're going to burn a drop of fat, or not much at all, because your body's got to prioritize getting rid of the sugar, which is basically toxic. So just crazy things happen when you snack too late, or at least for me and a few other people that I've talked to about this. So yeah, really cool things that you could learn there. With respect to the ingredients and blood sugar, we have to, of course, bring up Glucovantage, which is also my favorite form of berberine, known as dihydroberberine. And that's definitely one great way to kind of flatten that blood sugar roller coaster. Obviously, still, it's smart not to eat sugar all day long, but I do. But when using it, I prefer not to eat junk without at least a little bit of berberine or dihydroberberine in me. So we've had pretty good discussions on that as well. Is there any connection between the berberine and the mitochondria specifically?
Well, it's a glucose disposal agent and helps remove a glucose from just hanging around too long, and helps it potentially to be utilized as fuel, or more likely to be stored as glycogen than just hanging around and keeping insulin elevated. And that's the way that it's I'm blanking on the term. It enhances like the less fat tissue, more muscle kind of scenario with nutrient partitioning. I couldn't think of that term.
No, sorry.
But that's associated with things like berberine, metformin, et cetera, that are glucose disposal agents and work on AMP-K. But beyond that, it has been seen as mitoformesis impact. So it does cause the mitochondria a little bit of stress, and that's been misinterpreted in the past, that metformin or things like berberine might actually have a negative impact on aging for that reason. But we've seen studies with metformin where people are living 2 years longer just from that. And berberine outperforms metformin head to head. And then dihydroberberine is about 5 times more bioavailable than even berberine. So, when taken in the right dose and taken in the right way, you should expect that it would improve longevity, improve mitochondrial function. And that's what we're seeing. And it's really exciting because there's very few compounds that are like that. And for this reason, it's the number one thing I recommend in terms of longevity and health. I don't know anything that impacts health to that degree. Like there's a lot of stuff I take for health reasons, but if I was just to say be on one thing, it would probably be that.
Yeah, dihydroberberine is insane. Like I have trouble. I can't take the full, like, quote unquote recommended dose, because I need to eat so much food. It makes me it just makes me like suck down all sorts of everything. And if I was like in a bulking type phase, adding that in seems to be protective, but it also almost makes it like expensive because I have to eat that much more food. And I do think that it's a fascinating ingredient and love it. So yeah, typically I'm at a total of 200 milligrams per day, and I'm pretty good with that. But yeah, I'll sneak some in if I know I'm about to go raid the Halloween candy or something. Then which is going to be a one-day affair this year. It's going to dihydroberberine and Glucovantage are definitely gonna be rearing their heads. One ingredient we haven't talked about yet here is the form of the curcumin metabolite known as tetrahydrocurcumin. And one of the things that we saw is like this is it is an anti-inflammatory type of ingredient that seems to be beneficial for like things like joint pain and all that. But it hits a few different pathways differently or harder than curcumin itself. And a lot of those seem to be like the anti-diabetic, mitochondrial friendly pathways as well. So we recently started tinkering with that. And I think that's like, to me, the one underrated type of like multi-purpose joint supplement-ish ingredient that I think might have a play here that we're definitely going to explore a little bit more. But yeah, like if I were going to formulate my perfect joint supplement, which maybe at some point we should do like a formulator's corner and kind of like make some joke supplements up, or not joke, but like, make up some new supplements. I would do a stack of this tetrahydrocurcumin, which is known as curcuprime from NNB Nutrition, alongside of a solid standard curcumin supplement, like maybe a curcumin or something like that, and stack them to get the best of both worlds. But there seems to be a blood sugar lowering impact from this form of curcumin, maybe not as much as glucovantage or dihydroberberine, but there definitely seems to be something there. And one thing I'm noticing is that and there's a little bit of a confound because I'm drinking it alongside my coffee, but when I drink it alongside my coffee, I do seem to be a little bit more uppity, and there might be a little bit of a nootropic effect from that as well. So that's one ingredient that I'm thinking, like all these things are surrounding the mitochondria, and there might be a little bit of a play there.
Yeah, and dehydrozingerone as well could be complementary on that front. It's in that ginger pathway as a ginger metabolite, but it also is very chemically similar to curcumin as well. And it's kind of in that family of the tetrahydrocurcumin and curcuminoids. And so, yeah, we're seeing that's zingiberine and tetrahydrocurcumin is curcuprime, like you said, that those have powerful antioxidant effects, have also mitochondrial function enhancement through and reduction of inflammation. A number of these pathways that we're seeing, like you said, they're amazing compounds. Those would be atop my list as well. I mean, because they're affecting, again, those things that I was talking about, like oxidation, inflammation, glycation, and then mitochondrial health. And so when you can knock out some of those issues, that's when you're feeling more cellular energy. You're improving with your resiliency and your health response, and having a better health span than lifespan is by approaching those things. And that's kind of like the difference with how I'm supplementing now. Like it used to be like muscle at any cost, performance at any cost. And now I'm thinking about optimization and longevity. I think it's just that stage I'm at in my life. But I am seeing that these things that improve our health span and our lifespan, like really do improve quality of life. And we really do have more energy for life when we have more cellular energy. And when we remove some of these things that are problematic with the machinery of our bodies that are gunking us up, it's like getting an oil change or something. When you're getting rid of the inflammation, oxidation, and glycation, that now you're running optimally, and the mitochondria can, work more efficiently, and they're not having to work so hard in a damaged state to produce that energy that you need.
Yeah, definitely. Now, let's say that you were an obese person, and I've heard this a lot, is you begin to take on a healthier, low processed foods diet. So it's going to be lower in like the seed oils, lower in the linoleic acid, but you have a lot of this stuff like stored up in your body fat. I'm talking a lot about linoleic acid, which is one of the inflammatory omega-6 fatty acids that's in those seed oils I've been talking about. Eventually you got to burn that off. And a lot of people, they begin doing the fasting and everything like that. And that accelerates the fat burning as they start to become like ketogenic towards the end of their fast and everything. And I'm talking about like an intermittent daily type of fast. But sometimes they start feeling bad about it. They start feeling bad because, and I theorize it's because they're burning off a lot of this stored fat that is not the healthiest of tissue. And so one of my ideas is that some of these anti-inflammatories, such as a tetrahydrocurcumin, could be protective. And we've seen some studies between two of the NNB ingredients. So there's zingiberine, the dehydrozingerone, and L-ergothioneine, otherwise known as mitoprime. And that's not out there in any supplements that I know of right now. But they both are able to prevent some of the oxidation of the linoleic acid. So I theorize, this is all theorized, it was all theoretical, but I theorize that people are going to feel better if they're using these as fasting components so that they are able to protect themselves from some of the free radicals that are spun off as we're trying to burn off this like just terrible, processed food based body fat. And there's definitely research showing that the fatty acid compounds in our adipose tissue have changed over the last like 60 years. Like things have gotten worse and we've gotten fatter, but also our fat content has changed due to the foods that we're eating. And so like there's a kind of a challenge of staying healthy while we're trying to get rid of it. And I do theorize that some of these ingredients, the two of them specifically, may be quality for helping to burn that off without spinning off too many free radicals.
Yeah, that's a fascinating point, Mike, and one that I would love to see more research on. But it makes total sense that like when we're losing weight, like you're saying, either with fasting or dieting or what have you, that
Right.
yeah, these rancid oils that are creating cellular membranes and things like that are getting built into our cells. That can be released, and then that's certainly a problem from there. That these rancid oils are wreaking havoc on our body.
Yeah. What about some other stuff? Like you mentioned coenzyme Q10. There's creatine. Yep. I think if we're going to talk about mitochondria, you got to talk about creatine. It's about as cheap as it gets. If you eat as much beef as I do, I don't know if you totally need a ton of it, but yeah. So what other ingredients are there that are pretty, standard on the market ingredients?
Yeah, and well, there's ones that are specific to the mitochondria. I would say like PQQ and CoQ10 that work along that electron transport chain and are very helpful in terms of energy production. Certainly, if you're on a statin, that is a must to be on one. Or if you have heart problems, that is a must. To your point, some of the things that would affect methylation, like DNA methylation, are wonderful to have, like creatine, like betaine. I would look at some of the other methylating B vitamins like methylcobalamin and 5-methyl tetrahydrofolate as well. And then I like some of these ingredients. I'm really looking into kind of the NAD boosters, NAD to NADH ratio that happens in that Krebs cycle. You want to skew things more towards the NAD side of the equation. And so NR nicotinamide riboside has been looked at that. The data on it's not very compelling to me. The data is much better with NMN, nicotinamide mononucleotide, but you have to take larger doses. We're seeing it probably be like 1 to 2 grams. And so that's a lot higher than most people are using. But there's issues with NMN with stability, some with bioavailability with delivery. So that's actually something we're looking at pretty heavily with NNB is coming out with one that has enhanced stability, that isn't as affected by light, heat, and moisture, and also has better bioavailability. But there's another way, actually doing intranasal NAD seems to be somewhat effective. There's not a lot of data on it, but a lot of the anecdotal data I've seen is pretty good from people. And then IV NAD is really good, but it makes you feel nauseous, and you have to do it over about 3 or 4 hours. It's a little bit of a brutal process. Actually, vitamin C helps with mitochondrial health as well. That's something that I think you could definitely take more of, especially during this period of time. And as you pointed out, ergothioneine is a wonderful mitochondrial antioxidant, not just cellular antioxidant, but mitochondrial antioxidant that will protect the mitochondria. And we have unique machinery for in our body with the ergothioneine transport.
All right, I apologize for the delay. Okay, apologize for breaking that up there. We had a little bit of a scheduling problem, but also I've joined the likes of Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, and Mike Pence as someone who's, if you've been watching it on YouTube, I've had a fly flying around me for too long, and I was not able to take care of it during the break. So if it comes back, I'm just gonna have to swat at it, Shawn. So anyway, that fly is brutal. It was like 5 minutes. Anyway. We were talking about supplement ingredients. We were getting into creatine, talking about betaine. I was actually going to ask about throwing if we had a mitochondrial dysfunction and the sugar just wasn't burning anymore. Is sugar burner no more? Can we just throw ketones at the problem? Because I was going to think about L-carnitine to transport fatty acids, but also can I just throw BHB and MCT at the problem, or as a way to kind of like just try to assault some secondary fuel into the situation, or do I need to like get unspun first and then try to go for keto adaptation? Like, what would be your take there?
I think it's both. I mean, there's that endogenous versus exogenous discussion. Like, do you impair endogenous production if you're doing exogenous? And maybe for like a period of 30 minutes to an hour you are, but you're also upregulating the transporters, the MCT transporters, monocarboxylic acid like transporter. So you're enhancing the ability to take up ketones and use them for fuel by giving more. And I think when you're in periods of low energy, like I said, you can have impaired decision making. You can grab caffeine and candy bars and whatever. So getting ketones can help you with your longer intermittent fasting, help you with that post-lunch lull that you might feel in the afternoon. And I think that's where like MCTs and ketones could be helpful for that. And they could also like get you deeper into a fast, like with, enhanced levels of ketones. So they have strategic purpose. I like using them. I'm a big fan of the C8 MCTs, which NNB has as a
C8 Advantage, the powder.
Yeah, and then Keto Advantage for the active isomer of the BHB salts. So that's like the R or D BHB in sodium, magnesium, and calcium. You can do potassium, but it's a lower yield and it's less stable. So I'm a big fan of those. I love using ketones and MCTs for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's there's definitely with MCT, there is a study showing that it did seem to improve not keto adaptation, but it seemed to bring down the amount of keto flu people were getting, because there's a transition point where if you're like, okay, let's just say you've been eating a standard American diet for a while, this is clearly not working for me anymore. I'm fat and I have all this energy on my body, yet I don't feel energetic. Like there's something wrong here. That's when it's time to try something different. And the different thing outside of removing processed foods is to start to go the low carb keto route and see if your body can utilize these ketone bodies as the energy substrate instead. And there's definitely, especially for people who haven't like been in ketosis since the day they were born, pretty much, because they've just been fed like baby formula all the way through cereal, all the way through, the garbage in the middle of the grocery store, the rest in their entire life. It seems that some people need some time to adapt to this new form of energy, and that their cells or their whatever it is, the enzymes aren't properly upregulated yet. That mitochondria aren't ready to take it on. It seems like there is a definite like pain point where you have to get adapted, and it takes a little bit of time. And so the one study I saw showed that throwing more MCTs at the problem did make the pain be a little bit less. Although for me, I just grin and bear it usually. So. Yeah,
a lot of these ingredients are going to help with that transition if that's an issue for you. Glucovantage would help as well with blood sugar, and possibly beta, because where you have keto flu is like you're saying, alluding to, is when there's a bigger transition to switching fuel sources. So that would be if somebody has less muscle mass and maybe isn't doing resistance training. That would be when someone's less insulin sensitive. And that would be when someone hasn't done low carb or ketogenic dieting and is used to having a high carb, high glycemic diet. Things like that. And, when they're less active, it's like when you're more active, when you have more muscle mass, when you're used to doing low carb, then you have a higher carb tolerance, and you're also metabolically flexible. And so that'll allow you to transition easier back and forth to these fuel sources without having as much these flu-like symptoms. I mean, it's literally like a junkie coming off of, cocaine or something when you're, used to having so much sugar as well, to, reducing that to almost nothing. That can be a difficult transition. So that's what I've seen.
It's tough. Yeah. And in those situations, those are the times where I do support artificial sweeteners. And well, if you want to be more natural, you go with the stevia or monk fruit routes and everything. But at some point, you do have to realize that the sweeteners might be pushing you closer to falling off the wagon, because it's still kicking up that dopamine and you're still going to want more, So there's transitionary foods, and a lot of them are dietary supplements, the protein bars, a lot of stuff we work with. But to me, they're bridges and snacks and like crutches on occasion, but not things to be completely relied on. And I personally think that, and this is like everything we talk about on this channel is basically sweetened and everything, but at some point it's fun to go with nothing sweet at all, like just bitter and meat and stuff like that. And notice that for me, it takes about 3 days for like the wanting to go away. And then things do clear up a little bit more though after that. So it's kind of fun. And then that bitter coffee starts tasting really good at that point. You don't need that. So it's interesting to do, but we do also, I'm sitting here drinking some supplement right now. So we go both ways. It's Halloween after all.
Fair enough. Yeah. And I love, I've done the carnivore diet before, and man, like, like you're saying, about 3-4 days in, like I was struggling to eat, period. Mm-hmm. Especially I kind of did like a high rendered fat kind of ketogenic carnivore diet. And man, like, you actually lose the taste for processed food, sweetened food. And man, I was literally struggling to eat. Like I ended up going into like a 5-day fast the last time I did it. So had no problem with it, because I was already like, highly ketogenic at that point, even more than I normally am. And but these appetite hormones just plummet, and it's hard. It's like I was struggling to eat sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I typically don't go full carnivore. Like what I do a very close to, I call it kind of carnivore, where it is a very animal centric, high meat diet, and the fats might be up or down. I cook a lot with beef tallow because I'm a little bit sensitive to butter, it seems, but I still like my spices. I still like hot peppers. I still like bitter vegetables during those times. So I keep the asparagus, the broccoli, the Brussels sprouts, things that I know I react well to myself. Not everyone does, because of the oxalates and everything inside. And then I love spicy hot peppers. So like getting me to ditch my chili peppers or my chili paste and stuff like that is too big of an ask. But like I'll if I got to, I'll go carnivore and mess around. And then it becomes easy to modulate the salt too. And then you start realizing that you could use salt to knock down any sweet cravings, and the bitter can knock down sweet cravings. So it's really interesting. But at the end of the day, I do not see like a full-on carnivore diet as a long-term lifestyle for me, but very close. You're not going to get garlic and and hot peppers away from me. So that's where I'm at. But when I start working like that, you just start feeling this better control, and then the fasting becomes easier. And a lot of, there's a lot of naysay against fasting in terms of, again, weight loss, but there's just so many benefits of the way it makes you feel. And you can compensate for that fasting with a terrible, terrible diet on the other end of the day and blow it all apart. But once you start getting into that deeper level of ketosis, which it seems like guys are a little bit quicker. The younger you are, it's going to probably happen faster, especially like babies and stuff. They get into keto like super fast. But the men seem to operate a bit quicker on it. But like hours 16 through 18, like something really cool happens when you're not eating, and it's just like, I don't know, like if I'm doing programming work or whatever on the site, it's easier. It's just things click a little bit better. And I'm able to visualize the future of my program, not the future, but like the future of like what's going to happen in my code faster and earlier than when I am just like sipping on like the post-workout carbs and everything left and right. So that's
if it starts falling in like little green lines, then you fully
never gotten the ketones that high, but maybe with some of that Keto Vantage BHB or BHB. But no, I don't like to make claims like that. But no, I definitely think that that a deep ketosis. And this is why fasting has always been so important in the spiritual realm. Like getting back to where we kind of started, like some of this you mentioned, like nearly every religion has fasting. And I think it's been destroyed by like people who cheat on it and everything. But there's a reason why all these old religions have a fasting component to them, is because you get connected and you get wired in, and it feels incredible. And then and you could do with this information as you want, but like the prayer or the meditation then feels better too. Like, is it truly better? I can't tell you that, but you definitely feel more wired in. And that's why I like to occasionally get into like this low carbohydrate diet, but then pull it even deeper with like a 16 to 18 hour fast. But personally, I do not like to do like the crazy like 5-day multi-day fast. That is not up my alley, for various reasons. But I shrink too much pretty much, and then I feel like I lose a little bit too much strength, which it does come back when you start eating a lot of protein. But I also just don't like to send this is bro science here, I don't like to send my body the signal that its owner is a bad hunter. I like to tell my body that I can get it food whenever it wants. So have fun with it. So that's just like my bro science theory. But 3-day fast is pretty much the max I'll go.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think that's typically what I do, is maybe once every couple months, typically a 3-day fast. But it's actually great for mental resilience as well, to let yourself know that you will not die without food.
Yeah.
That you're just fine without food, that you don't need to have food when you're sitting with friends, that you don't need to have food when you go out to the movie theater, when we were doing that, or these other things, all these places that we have food and consider food an essential part of all these gatherings. And
right.
You don't need to have the food, and there's something about that empowers you in a really unique way. Like, people think that you'll literally die if you go a day without eating.
Oh, you're going to the quote-unquote starvation mode. Yeah,
exactly. And to not only not die, but feel alert and clear and better than you normally feel. Like, it's really enlightening and empowering. And it's certainly, like you said, a part of that spiritual process that's been around for thousands of years.
Yeah, and not only that, it's freeing, because let's get back to like my program example. Like, people call it the flow state when you get in the zone, pretty much. And like a really good programming session or writing session or whatever, jam session, if you're a musician, like 3 hours, like you really, that first hour, you're kind of bubbling through things a little bit, the first half hour, then like you get going. And if you have to eat every 2 hours, you are going to lose so much awesome productivity. Or if your blood sugar is dropping like a tank and you have to like worry about like doing this up and down between hour 1.5 to 3 hours, but somewhere between there, you're losing like this incredible third hour of just excellence. And when you don't have to worry about food, and food's not worrying about you, it's not haunting you, nothing, it's not even in the mind, you're just cruising.
And you save a lot of time in your day. You save so much time in your day.
Right.
So much of your day revolves around, what am I going to eat? Prepping that food, eating that food, for like putting away that food, cleaning up, shopping for that food. Like, literally just, calling your friends, like, hey, where are we going for food? Like, everything, like your whole day is like, food can be the focus of your day, and the work that you do, or the things that you do with other people, ends up being like the things that are fit in between the food.
Right. And I do love cooking. Like, I love the process of cooking and providing for the family. And we were recently on a trip with the in-laws, and like, while they were all playing with our daughter, I became like kind of the executive chef of the weekend. I love that, the whole thing of preparation. But on a day-to-day basis, we're trying to get work done. Bulk cooking is just, bodybuilders know this, of course, but like bulk cooking is such a huge thing, because if you're spending all day long worrying about the food and cooking it and everything, you're just less productive, and we have to stay busy. So like simple hacks of just busting out the crock pot and getting a lot of good snapware, and just, it's okay to eat some refrigerated food that's been in there for 2 days. It's not gonna hurt you, and it's gonna save a lot of time too. But yeah, the best time saver is just going on that intermittent fast and just not worrying about it for a while. It's freeing. And some people don't even understand that. And I do suggest that people at least try to get to that point, and you'll eventually, once you've catered your diet towards something that's acceptable for that, you're going to start feeling better too. And that's where I think the mitochondria are starting to feel freed up as well. I think the freeing is a physical and kind of a mental thing.
Yeah, totally makes sense. I totally agree.
Yeah, we're on the same page. What do we disagree on, Shawn?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know, Mike. I think we're pretty much synced up.
Yeah. I think my biggest driver is, though, I'm probably a little bit more pro carb than you might be.
Yeah.
At least in certain situations, but I'm probably 1,000 times more anti-seed oil than most people are. So it's like very similar opinions. I just think, we think that there's different ends of the world, I guess.
Agreed. I appreciate you having me on, and definitely want to do more videos. And I'm excited about this. And Mito is, like I've said, the next keto, and I'm a big fan of all things mitochondrial health. And anyone can hit me up on my website, shawnwells.com, SHAWN, or at Ingredientologist on the social platforms. And yeah, I'm excited to answer any questions that you guys might have, and appreciate having me on again. Thanks.
Right. And if you're watching or listening from the future, your book is The Energy Formula, right?
Yes.
It'll be The Energy Formula.
It'll talk a lot about mitochondrial health, a lot about my journey, how I can help you, exercise, nutrition, biohacking, supplementation, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it'll be energyformula.com.
Okay, awesome. I was going to say, where can we sign up if we're watching not in the future and we want to get notified? Are you going to have are you building a list over there? Or?
Yeah. Yep, exactly.
Energy Formula.
It's not up yet.
I was going to say, that's a nice, gotcha. Good thing I didn't do the screen share on that. But yeah, that's a nice domain you got there. All right, sweet. Well, Shawn Wells, once again, thank you so much. We'll have this video up and we'll be sharing it. And at Ingredientologist is where you can reach Shawn. And we are, of course, at PricePlow. And check out some of the articles that we'll have linked in the YouTube description, where we're going to talk about not just the whole mitochondria story, but also some of the ingredients that we've discussed, because they kind of go in different directions, but they all work with this whole attitude around clean energy. So thanks again, Shawn. And thanks everyone out there for watching and listening. And that fly didn't come back, so I will get it. See you later.
All right. Thanks.
Welcome to PricePlow.